Have you ever looked back on a relationship and suddenly realized someone had been quietly loving you all along? Not because they finally told you, but because, months later, dozens of forgotten moments suddenly started making sense. The way they always found a reason to talk to you. The way they noticed small changes that everyone else ignored. The way they smiled differently when you walked into the room. At the time, none of it seemed important. Now it feels obvious. So why is it that we often recognize love only after it's already slipping away? Psychology has an interesting answer. Love rarely arrives with a dramatic confession. More often, it grows so slowly that neither person notices it happening. Imagine two strangers meeting for the first time. Nothing extraordinary happens. They simply enjoy talking. Days turn into weeks. Weeks become months. Without realizing it, their conversations become part of each other's routine. This is where something fascinating begins. The human brain is constantly asking one silent question. How does this person make me feel? Not, how attractive are they? Not, how successful are they? But, how do I feel after spending time with them? Because emotions, more than facts, shape memory. If every conversation leaves you feeling calmer, if every meeting makes an ordinary day seem a little brighter, your brain starts connecting that emotional relief to one specific person. And that's how attachment quietly begins. Not through one unforgettable moment, but through dozens of ordinary ones. Ironically, this is why so many people completely miss the beginning of love. They're waiting for fireworks. Their brain is busy building familiarity. Researchers have long known that familiarity changes how we experience people. The more safe, positive interactions we share, the more natural someone's presence begins to feel. Eventually, something subtle changes. You stop enjoying the conversation itself and start looking forward to the person behind it. There's an important difference. One is pleasure. The other is emotional investment. At first, you smile because the conversation is interesting. Later, you smile before the conversation has even started. That's when emotions begin moving beyond simple friendship. But attachment has another side. The stronger the emotional bond becomes, the greater the risk of losing it. And strangely enough, that's exactly why many people stay silent. Most people assume silence means uncertainty. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes silence exists because the feelings have become too important. Imagine spending months building a connection with someone. You laugh together, share personal stories, support each other during difficult weeks. One day you realize you've developed feelings. Now you face a painful question. If I tell them, and they don't feel the same, what happens to everything we've already built? Suddenly, honesty doesn't feel brave. It feels dangerous. Because rejection isn't the only thing at stake. You could lose the friendship, the routine, the comfort, the one person who made ordinary days feel different. So instead of speaking, many people choose to wait, not because they don't care, because they care too much. This creates one of the biggest paradoxes in human relationships. The people who feel the deepest emotions are often the ones who hide them the longest. Not everyone, of course, but often enough that psychologists have studied the pattern for decades. Fear doesn't always push people away. Sometimes it freezes them exactly where they are. Meanwhile, life quietly continues. You still meet, still joke, still exchange messages. Everything looks the same from the outside. Inside, everything has changed. Then something unexpected happens. Not a romantic date, not a dramatic confession, just absence. Maybe one of you gets busy. Maybe conversations become less frequent. Maybe life simply pulls you in different directions for a while. That's when the brain notices something it couldn't see before. The emotional space that person used to occupy. You hear a funny story. Your first instinct is to tell them. Halfway through reaching for your phone, you remember they aren't there. You visit a place you once went together. It feels strangely quieter than before. Nothing around you has changed. Only your awareness has. Psychologists sometimes describe this as emotional contrast. We often recognize the importance of something only after it's temporarily missing. Just like we notice silence after music stops. We notice emotional attachment after connection is interrupted. For some people, that's the moment everything becomes clear. Not because love suddenly appeared, because it had been growing unnoticed all along. And once that realization arrives, another psychological force begins taking over. Regret. Behavioral research consistently shows that people fear regret almost as much as failure itself. The question changes. It is no longer, what if they reject me? It becomes, what if I never tell them? Those two questions may sound similar, but they lead to completely different decisions. One protects you from immediate pain. The other protects you from lifelong uncertainty. Eventually, for some people, the fear of never knowing becomes stronger than the fear of rejection. That's why so many confessions seem to happen out of nowhere. They rarely come from a sudden burst of courage. More often, they're the result of weeks, months, or even years of quiet emotional accumulation, finally reaching a point where silence hurts more than honesty. And perhaps that's the most misunderstood part of love. People think relationships begin with someone saying, "I like you." In reality, those words usually arrive long after the relationship has already begun inside the mind. Long after familiarity became comfort. Comfort became trust. Trust became emotional dependence. And dependence quietly became love. So if someone in your life hasn't said how they feel, don't assume there's nothing there. Silence is complicated. Sometimes it hides indifference. But sometimes it hides emotions that have become too valuable to risk losing. The difficult part is knowing the difference, because psychology can explain how feelings grow. But only honesty can reveal whether they're truly there. So let me ask you something. Have you ever realized someone loved you only after it was too late? Or have you ever stayed silent, only to wonder years later what might have happened if you'd simply told the truth? Sometimes, the most life-changing conversations are the ones we spend the longest avoiding. And maybe that's exactly why they matter so much.